without further ado, I want to turn to my panelists. We've got a great group tonight, and we're talking about the kind of the emerging strategic nature of human resources. And we have organizations large and small. We have people who've been at organizations large and small. And the idea is to give you tonight really a spectrum of opinions from people and organizations about the nature of this role, and really specifically how they're rolling out new programs to maximize the new mandate of HR. So, just to begin, I'd like each of you to introduce yourselves, let us know a little bit about your organization, and then why don't you tell us a bit about how you've seen HR change over the last 10 years?
That's a lot to start, my goodness. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Ryan Smith. I work for GE, and I'm the HR leader for a part of the company called Business Innovation. So I think it would be a good topic to talk about sort of innovation, and I can explain a little about what's going on. I feel a little underdressed. I should have worn the green socks, so my apologies next time.
We can make some
I'll
changes.
Make note. So
I show enough sock right now, by the way.
I was going to say enough for me.
I'm trying to be also dangerous, but
That's great. Look, I first of all, it really is a pleasure to be here. I think we've got folks that are from lots of different organizations. I think, although I've worked in a big organization for most of my career, I work with big and small organizations, and so hopefully I can provide some perspective from that point of view. I think any company, large or small, is facing challenges of speed, capability, and markets that are changing rapidly. And so I suspect that we'll talk a lot about tonight how the HR function evolves to be able to help our businesses win when speed and talent and competitiveness is at an all-time high, and volatility in markets and in the world is affecting how we do our work. So I'm excited to be on the panel and to learn from the team. So thanks for having me.
thank you. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Ciara Lacani, and I'm the head of people and culture at Compass, which is a 4-year-old real estate startup. We work with experienced real estate agents similar to a real estate brokerage, but also bring technology to the process similar to a company such as Zillow. So those real estate agents will work solely with Compass to help you find or sell a home, and then our team of about 310 staff members are providing all the technology, engineering, marketing, and support to enable experienced real estate agents to do their job better with Compass. So I joined there about 2 years ago and came from GE previous to that. So I've been back and forth twice now in HR between big companies and startups. So have seen a lot of change in that time, and also similarities and differences between the sizes. I think though, when I think back over the past 10 years, what seems to have changed to me most is perhaps not what's talked about in the HR press or what the overall trends are, although the hype over performance review certainly seems to be the new thing the past couple of years. But more so for me anecdotally, maybe it's because it's what I experience day to day in my job. It feels that the expectations of employees to really feel engaged and motivated and passionate, and that we're fulfilling their career needs, have become more diverse and in many cases more difficult to satisfy. So I feel like in my generation, we got advice from our parents: graduate college, take your first job, you might not like it, but suck it up, keep your head down, work hard, and it will lead to other things. And make sure you have a great manager and it's a great organization. And I don't think that that's advice that many of the younger employees, especially that me and my team help, are getting. And so people's expectations, their desires are a lot more personalized. So how do we contribute to that, and how do we mobilize people to get them excited about the same thing? That's what's most interesting to me and what feels like the biggest change.
Do you see this as a generational change, or is it more of a societal change?
So that's always the big question.
Are we going to use the M word here?
I've been attending panels where, they talk about how everyone is different for, about 14 years now, and
we're trying to avoid it. There's no millennials in the cards tonight, but we got there in the first question.
Yes, but it's hard to tell, is it generational or is it just a shift with changing times? But I don't think it's important why it is, but it's more so how will we best tackle this if the business is getting what they need, but employees are also getting their needs fulfilled.
Great. So Sue, welcome back to the panel. Appreciate you coming back after going through this once. You decided to join us again. For those who don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit about your company?
Sure. Hi, my name is Sue Cho. I'm the VP of People at a company called First Bids. We're an online marketplace for rare and beautiful objects in like vintage furniture, antique jewelry, fine art, and what other categories I'm forgetting? Fashion. That's right. And I've been there since the beginning of the year. Prior to First Bids, I was the head of people at Venmo, which is a mobile peer-to-peer payments app. And then prior to that, I held positions in HR at D.E. Shaw, which is a hedge fund, and at McKinsey & Company, a consulting firm. So I've also kind of experienced a little bit of the startup versus a more established company. I would say, there's been a lot of change in HR, and I moved into HR about 10 years ago, kind of recognizing these changes were afoot. And I think the three that I'd highlight are probably driving some of this sort of desire for more engagement that Sierra's talking about. One, I think, is kind of the rise of startups that are being led by really idealistic CEOs that are prioritizing people alongside business objectives. I think that's also leading to kind of war for talent, and especially among knowledge workers who look to work as being much more than just a paycheck. It's a community. So I think those two things are making HR like really kind of up front and center as a priority for companies. And I think the third thing that I think is really exciting is the advent of data-driven HR. So companies like Google have really now helped us quantify and show the value of things like that used to be kind of squishy, like employee engagement or the value of managers. And now that that's something that we're able to show the impact of, I think it really gives us a seat at the table with executives and kind of business leaders. So that's kind of an exciting time.
Elizabeth, also second-time panelist. For those who don't know, you can introduce yourself.
Sue and I were actually together here about a year ago. Thanks everybody for having us. My name's Elizabeth Berman. I'm the Chief People Officer at a company called Home Team. And we're a fairly new startup, a couple years old, and we're in the home healthcare business, which is a little bit different than where I previously came from, which is a music tech business. So Home Team delivers in-home healthcare to older adults, and we're trying to really revolutionize that industry on two fronts. One, working with older adults to have more beautiful days in their home. A lot of theory, a lot of research has been done in terms of just how much better aging is in your own home. And with that, ensuring that people are aging in their home and having a really great experience while doing that. And that really comes down to the caregiver, and that's really what my team is really focused on, not only recruiting, but also really retaining and empowering and delivering great caregivers to our families. And that's no small feat in terms of just, if you look at it from a numbers perspective, there's about 2.5 million caregivers in the United States. We need another million to get us to 2022. And there's 10,000 people turning 65 every single day. So there's a lot of caregivers that we're going to need. And one of the reasons I joined Home Team was really the fact that we're helping to professionalize this business. And we're really looking to help advocate for our caregivers, which is virtually unheard of in a market where caregivers are really not a profession. They're very little paid. If you're not familiar, most caregivers barely reach the poverty line, a little bit north of it at best. And they're not supported from an education perspective, and that's something that Home Team's looking to change, and was the reason I joined. So I'm 8 weeks into my job, and it's been just an opportunity to connect a mission and a profession has been just amazing. So HR, I think I'll add definitely data. I think has been a big thing. But I would say nimbleness, the ability for us to flex, and I think that's what kind of maybe is a thread amongst all of us that we've shared in terms of how I think HR has changed. I think at least over the last 20 years, oftentimes you build a program and then you keep that program on your shelf. And it was that's your performance program, and that stayed in place, and that was your comp program, and that stayed in place. And And I think between the mix of employees expecting more of us, but moreover our business expecting more of us to deliver more, we as HR professionals have to be more nimble. We have to be able to react more to the industry, to our business, how our business is moving. And with that, I would say innovation. You know, it's no longer okay for HR to sit on the sidelines and not innovate. So I think it's asking us as HR professionals to be more creative, be more innovative, as well as being analytical. And I don't know that you necessarily would put those characteristics together. You know, a decade ago, when we were thinking about hiring an HR professional and say that I need to hire a creative thinker. You know, and I think now that's expected.
So Elizabeth, I'm curious, we had a conversation a few minutes ago just about the extent to which Home Team is mission driven. And so I'm wondering, what is the role of HR in delivering that mission? And what do you even call the organization? I know there's a lot of names for it, and does it matter what you call it?
I don't know that it matters. To me personally, I don't know that it matters. I joked with our current CEO, and actually at my prior company, when I was the first person to come in for HR, they spent weeks discussing what HR should be called. I told them at the end of the day, we're still delivering people function. So what you call us, we're still delivering. Here at Home Team, we're called People Ops. We were People Ops at my last company too. I think the operations piece is very front and center for where we are in Home Team, and it's unlike any HR job I've ever had or been responsible for as a function. And that's because it's so mission critical in our organization. So we have the ability to actually call it revenue in our company, which I don't know how many HR teams can say that they can do. So I have a bunch of people here who are responsible for caregiver recruiting. If we don't have a caregiver at the ready when a family needs them, we can't deliver to that family. And that's both like really fun and challenging. And I joke that it's the thing that probably keeps me up at night, is making sure that we're ready at all times with the workforce that's needed in order to deliver that. And I think the other thing that we're most responsible for, and I was kind of saying that earlier in my introduction, is advocating for our caregivers. And most, just to kind of paint a picture, right? For those of you who are somewhat familiar with the home care industry, it's mostly mom and pops that are running it. And I'm super respectful to all the companies that are out there trying to make it in this industry. But the challenge that it is that most caregivers are treated like commodities by those organizations. It's a very, they treat it as very disposable. So if you're a caregiver with a family and you call into the agency and you say, hey, I'm not having a good moment with my caregiver, can you switch this person out? Most of the time that caregiver is now being fired. In our organization, we stop and we say, and we do, but probably any of you in this room do when you have an employee relations issue, which is, let me hear it out. Let me understand from the business what's going on. Let me understand from the employee what's going on. Let's dig into it and understand it and do some investigation. Let's see where it leads us. And that's what we do at Home Team, right? We take care of our caregivers. We listen to them. We advocate for them. We empower them. And our turnover now is at 14% in an industry that's 150% to 160%. So that's what my team does, and we are out there on the front lines every single day. And that's why I think it's such a different HR role from anything that we've had. We're going to change this industry. We're going to professionalize the caregiver. I think it's just amazing.
So I'm curious, at Compass, how have you brought the role of human resource, or again, the name that you guys call it, at People, how have you integrated that with the strategy of the organization?
So I think similar, Elizabeth, to what you said, it to me personally doesn't matter so much, what it's called, as long as we're using the same core skills to help that group of people and the business to both be successful and to thrive. But when I joined, our team was called Human Capital, which our CEO got the inspiration for from his time at Goldman Sachs, which directly preceded starting Compass. And when I came in, I saw that one of the missions of what we were trying to do is really establish an internal brand and feel for our team so that all of our staff members could know what to expect, and that would be one of the things that would encourage them to interact in the way that we want them to and to feel comfortable always approaching us and providing their feedback. So we wanted to rename the department because of that, because we talked amongst my team and said, do we think human capital, right, is the right name for the culture that we currently have, for the employees that we have here, that's going to make them feel the way that we want. We collected some feedback, we did some benchmarking, and then the great thing about a young organization is you can go to the leadership team with that and say, hey, we would like to change our name, here's what we think the pros and cons are, here's what other companies are calling their HR departments and how that's evolved over the years. And we were going to go with people ops as well, and then our COO actually got into it and said, I think a really important part of what you do is culture. So what if you're called people and culture? And we're like, we love that, that's fun. And it was really fun to not only be able to change the name, but to see, the employees who were there at the time react really positively to that. And I think the way you asked, how it ties to strategy, not directly, but I think part of that is, what is our branding? And when I was at GE, I think there were a lot of long-term employees who very clearly knew this is what HR does. These are the type of things we go to them for. As a manager, this is what we get support for. When you're in a very new organization and we have people who come from all different industries and backgrounds, there wasn't that common understanding. So I think it is part of the strategy for us to brand and project a certain image so that we're interacting with all the employees the way that we want to.
So let's go down to the next level. We talked a little bit about strategy, the overall goals of the organization. And Ryan, I think you might be able to teach a masterclass in our next topic, but I want to go down to how do you think about the role of the HR department in terms of setting metrics for yourself? So how do you know what success looks like? And also, how do you partner with the lines of business in order to understand their goals and create an aligned set of metrics that you all can rally around?
Well, I think first of all, the two have to be combined, right? So just for a little bit of context, I think the introductions were great. The team that I'm a part of, we call Business Innovations, but it's really a mix of a lot of different things. So the lady that leads this team is Beth Comstock, and Beth used to be the CMO for GE, and now she's first female vice chair, which is awesome for the company. But Beth really has a number of different things, so therefore I get involved in lots of different stuff. So first, she leads sales, marketing, brand, communications, advertising across the whole GE portfolio. And then she has three lines of business. One is the venture capital company that we have, so we have a core venture capital company where I have a chance to really interact with a lot of startups. We also have a business called Current Powered by G, which is our first internal startup, so it's really sort of interesting to be in that role. And then in the spirit of sort of 30 Rock, we also have microwave programming, so we have lighting inside of our business. So what I find interesting about the question is, all of those are so diverse and different. And as an HR person or HR leader, or whether that means you're the leader of the team or you're somebody that's doing recruiting, you have to understand what will make that team or that business successful. What's going to make a startup, a new power startup successful is a lot different than what's going to help a business like GE Lighting or when we think about sales talent across the company successful. So I think great HR folks are able to identify what are those success factors for the business and then to quickly align what the HR activities are. So just use a couple of examples. We started this business called Current, powered by GE. On purpose, it's not GE Current, it's a totally different brand. We've had to do a totally different mix of talent from the outside and the inside. Great big institutions have a chance to kind of work talent from the inside. This is the complete opposite. We've hired folks from the outside. The leadership team is from the outside. We use entrepreneurs and residents from the outside. So the way I define success for the HR team that works in that business is how quickly are they able to find the talent and be able to pull that talent in with our value proposition to run the business. So that's a great way to define it. Quickly, are they the right people? Are we able to compensate them, incentivize them? We can't use the old GE systems to incentivize folks like this. They have to be done in a totally different way. So that's a great example in Current. In lighting, this is a really old business, right? So it's a technology that's changing, and we've had to completely restructure the company, which is hard work for anybody that's done that, right? So when you close factories or you lay off thousands of people, success is, yes, it's executing the business of doing that, and so I measure my team on, A, are they able to execute the restructuring, but I also measure them on sort of how well we treat employees with respect and dignity, how well we might work with our unions in that example to negotiate the terms of the exit. And then I come to like a corporate role where we're hiring folks from brands. So we hire a lot of folks from like advertising agencies. Totally different kind of world than lighting. And so our ability to retain those folks is really important. So I'll measure our team on, once we have them, how much turnover do we have? That seems like a very logical and traditional metric, but when you have 15 folks who have extremely unique skills, our ability to be creative in what they need, how they operate, what's important to those people, how do we grow their careers, that's a way I measure it. So, and it's a way that my boss measures our team. So it has to be linked to what are the business objectives, and I always say, look, if I feel like our team is helping the business win, and sometimes it's just that simple. How does the business win, and are we enabling it? Whether it's through people, process, or culture, that to me is really the way to do it.
Is that a collaborative conversation with the line business leader, or is that something that you take given the overall business unit strategy?
I think great HR people bring it to the business leader, right? So if you understand the business, if you know what winning means for that particular organization, you should know what to pull from your HR team to be able to do that. And yes, it's a collaborative discussion, but I say it that way because for those who are kind of growing their HR career, don't wait. Know your business. Bring the objectives. Be proactive about here's what's got to happen for us to be successful. And then, of course, work with your business leader to be able to say, hey, are we on the same page, etc. So Beth and I are going to meet next week, and we're going to do something where we just recap. What have we done for the year? What do we think we're going to be doing next? I've got a list of 5 or 6 key things that we're working on. I'm like, look, I think we should kill these 2. They're not that critical for us. We got to move in this direction. So it's a collaborative discussion for sure.
So I'm curious about your experience as well. So you 10 years ago probably had a very unusual background in HR, coming in from McKinsey, coming in from strategic consulting. In my experience now, and probably yours as well, it's not as unusual anymore. But I imagine you brought with it some business skills that you maybe otherwise wouldn't have had. And so how do you start to think about how to align the goals of the HR department with the business as a whole, and how do you measure and manage the team?
So I think first of all, it's really hard to measure the success of HR because it's not like there's just one objective measurement. I think success is, you can measure success by looking at incremental changes over time. But I guess I'd like to kind of highlight a framework that really resonated with me that was recently on LinkedIn. It was written by the VP of People at Greenhouse, Maya Joseph Bakhtiali, I think is that how you pronounce it. And she introduced the concept of employee lifetime value. So in the same way you can measure customer lifetime value, you can also measure employee lifetime value. And she kind of outlined what are the different initiatives and ways HR can really maximize that value. And it came down to 4 things, and I think you can think about different metrics that tie to those 4 things. So one of them is obviously recruiting. You want to recruit quickly and you want to recruit great people. And great people are those that are going to perform well once they get to the company, and you can measure their performance by looking at the performance reviews, and also to see are they multiplying other people around them? Are they attracting amazing other people to join the company? So there's a lot of value in recruiting, and so that's something that we measure pretty closely. The second thing is onboarding. So the quicker you get someone up to speed and able to be fully productive, the faster they're able to start producing. And so what are ways that you can create onboarding and training so that they're able to kind of do that within 2 weeks or 3 weeks? So the faster you're able to do that, and the delta between what you're able to do today versus a year from now, I can make a huge difference. The third is around management and development. So obviously, if they're getting managed well and they're being developed well, then you'll see progress over time and they'll be able to do more. And then the last thing, I think, to your point, is around retention. And well, actually, she calls it culture, because culture, the purpose of that is really to create an environment where people want to stay. So look at retention, look at what your average kind of tenure is when people are leaving, and try to maximize that, especially for the people who are high performing. So I think that's one way of kind of looking at how you measure success. I think the other part of HR, which I think doesn't get a lot of airtime, but is just as important, is when there's no noise. When there's no issues that get escalated, there's no compliance issues, there's no employment relations.
So nobody calls and says everything's going great?
Right. No one's going to tell you this, but silence is actually really a success metric in that front. So I think that's another thing. And the last thing I would say, kind of tying it all together, is being able to do this while decreasing cost per employee and increasing revenue per employee, because that's sort of the measure of scaling. And like you can do all those other things, like throwing a ton of money at it, but to be able to do it while also keeping those metrics in mind are really important.
So I want to go back to something that Ryan said. We're going to go off piece a little bit here. So I think this notion of early in your career, connect with the executive in the line of business to really understand their needs, so you're matching those. It's a line of conversation that came up quite a bit when we were talking to Facebook and PayPal about the same topic. And so they were talking about items like having HR generalists sit with the lines of business they support, not having the HR, the people team sit together. And that's a tactic. But I guess my question to the group here is, one, what do you think holds us back, or holds especially some of our more junior employees back from initiating a conversation? And two, are there structural things like co-location or rotations or other things that you've seen work to start to engender that conversation so we can really understand the needs of the business that we're serving?
Is that good for me?
It's for everybody.
Oh. I mean, I can try to answer it, but I mean, at First Dibs, we're not a huge organization, and I didn't mention this in the beginning. We're about 275 people, and we've grown by about 65 people this year. I think one of the challenges we now face is that we have 2 locations in Manhattan. And so one of the explicit decisions we made was to have someone from the people team located at the other office every day of the week. Because I think it is really important for them to have someone who is local and they can just kind of go to and run into in the kitchen and just have a conversation. Because that's actually how we're going to hear about things. I mean, we can't be isolated in an office. We're sitting right in the middle of the throes of everything, and people, I think, feel pretty comfortable coming to us.
I think there are a couple of things that really help. Organizations large or small, so you said like folks that are sort of early in their career. I think you have to set it as an expectation for your HR team that you're going to learn the business, right? To me, it's maybe I take it for granted in some ways. To me, you're a business person first, and the practice that you're there to do is HR work. You've got to be able to understand, to be able to really be pulled in to the organization so that you can be even that much more effective with your clients and your customers. And there are things that you can do to help enable that. Just my personal experience, I spent almost a year with our internal financial auditing teams, where there were no HR folks, it was just auditors, right? So it was my way of learning the financials, and it, you know, when I first did it, I thought I was going to throw up, right? It was just one of those experiences. Those are the good ones, right? When you know you took a job where you think you're just going to be sick every day. You get over it, you learn, right? And then you grow. But any company, large or small, can do that, right? So you might take a 6-month assignment in sales, or you might do something else. Really great, nimble HR folks have the ability to do that, and I think as a community, we should promote more and more of that, because it allows the business teams to connect, to trust, and to really enable the function, whatever we call it, to be even more impactful inside the business. I'm not sure.
Well, I actually did the same thing early on in my career. Early on in my career, when I worked for Macy's, I ended up actually switching out for about 18 months, did not do HR, and went into product and merchandising. And it was a very controversial moment, I would say, because I got brought down to the CEO's office at the time, and he's like, "You want to leave HR and you want to go into the business? So whenever you want to come back, you're going to be so much better to me and more valuable to me on the HR team, because you're going to know our business that much better." He made me promise when I was ready to come back to HR that I would do it with him. And I did, and it was an immeasurably impactful experience from doing that, because I was one of the few HR people who could sit at the table and talk about P&L and talk about a sell-through and really understand how we were moving our business in retail. And that stayed with me for a long time. And early in my career, before I was in HR, I was running restaurants, and I moved from running restaurants into doing HR for the restaurant company I was at. And I had that same experience of really understanding the business. And oftentimes was told by my business partners, you've never forgotten what it means to be on the front lines. And it's something that I have brought with me through all of the different experiences that I've had thus far, which is really jumping in and sitting with your business, going to their meetings, even if you don't belong there, even if you're just there to be a fly in the wall, to really hear the conversations that are going on, the challenges that they're having. And also as leaders, you can learn a lot in terms of where you need to coach. As you're watching managers lead their meetings and you're watching how people interact. Because so often we're just brought like the issue, or we're brought and you're trying to figure out where what happened and how you can help those individuals. But if you're in those meetings, it's so powerful. You're really able to understand what is going on real time and adjust and help and support your business through that. So I think that there's meaning from it from both sides, both just from a financial perspective, but also just from an operational perspective.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and I guess all four of us have had experiences that are outside HR and to build credibility, really knowing the business, and I definitely recommend that to everyone. In coaching more junior HR staff, and what do I think is the biggest thing that perhaps holds some of them back? I think it's the confidence that how if no one is going to give you the credibility off the bat that they expect you to understand the business, and in many cases they may expect you to not understand the business. How do you get past that lack of confidence and start having those conversations about the business and build that trust and credibility? So I think a good manager can help coach a person past that. And Brian, as you said, make it an expectation that you're not excelling at your job even if you're doing 100% of our HR specific things like the best way, if you're not also adding to the business, building that credibility, knowing what's going on with the business.
It's about running towards that fear of failure. And we see that as we train sales teams, and a lot of people are nervous about making those first few calls because they're going to make mistakes. Similarly, applying the business. You'll make mistakes, and you just need to be not afraid of making them, because everybody expects it. So I'm curious now that we've gone from strategic down to goal of the company and how HR relates to that, down to how we participate in that goal. I'd like each of you to speak about the one or two programs that you're focusing on rolling out internally, so more tactical type programs that help underlie this. And Elizabeth, maybe we can start with you. So what are one or two of your big priorities in your first 8 weeks on the job?
We're 8 weeks in. I would say probably more priorities of where our team is really focused right now is a few places. One, on the corporate recruiting side, we're still building out our C-suite, so we're spending a lot of time in corporate recruiting, helping to bring leaders on at that level, as well as our director level. On the caregiver recruiting side, we are spending, just even in the last, week and a half, guys, really focus on trying to drive a lot of efficiencies because our business is literally exploding in front of us and we're trying to run and keep up. So we're doing a lot of deep analysis, both on just pure data, trying to understand where our caregivers are coming from and really trying to do a lot of deep dives on the reporting side, but also looking at just how we're bringing caregivers in and what that experience looks like and how we can do that in a more efficient and effective way. So I think those are probably the two areas that we're most focused in. And then the last part is really just foundational work, right? So we're a couple-year-old company, we're scaling really fast. And so with that, we need to switch out our systems, our own engine in HR, right? So we're bringing in a new HRIS system. And oh yes, we're overhauling our entire benefit program. So if anything I've made has made you feel nauseous, it's because we're literally doing every single lever in HR is being touched right now. And all of them are priorities to get us into 2017.
Yeah, I think as I think about the next year, the priorities have shifted from what we focused on this year. It was very much kind of similar to what Elizabeth was saying. It's kind of getting things going and getting the foundation there. And recruiting was obviously huge. We got on board probably over 80 people this year. But I think going forward, we're going to slow down some of the recruiting, and we want to focus on maximizing the potential of the employees that we have on staff. And so that means things like really robust manager training, all staff training. One thing that we recently started rolling out is career laddering and being very clear on what competencies we care about and what that looks like at different roles and levels. And just that kind of thing, I think is going to be fundamental to helping people understand what it means to be successful and to be good at First Dibs. I think the other thing related to this is prioritizing the way we think about performance management and making sure people are calibrated, and especially managers, and understanding and having them understand what great looks like, and the fact that they shouldn't just settle for the status quo, and that they should feel like they are empowered to be able to go and find the best and to be able to honestly assess the people on their team. So I think those are probably the two big priorities.
So in terms of priorities, but then you also asked about programs, I also spent year one, recalling everything. So it feels good when that work is mostly finished, even though, as you said, it's not, you can put it on the shelf and this is our program forever, so you're always fine-tuning and refreshing all of those. So on top of that, two things that we've been able to kick off this year in full that we're excited about as programs are, one, the first 90 days experience for our new hires. So it's making the onboarding process into a really comprehensive full 3 months and looking at that from multiple angles to address, Sue, as you said, the employee lifetime value and how you can get that person up to speed more quickly. So not only so that they will be performing more quickly, but also feel more comfortable and feel more part of the Compass community. So from the first day onboarding and how we teach them about the company and our values, to bringing them to a group lunch and getting them to know people, working with the managers on setting goals for the first 30, 60, 90 days so the person has a roadmap for what he or she is going to accomplish, having roundtables with some of our executives, having programs where they're brought together, a check-in with a member of our team to be like, hey, it's been 2 weeks, how's it going? How have your conversations with your managers been? And then we survey and run analytics on that and see how we tweak it over time. So that's something that, especially with a lot of hiring and a lot of growth, has been really key for us. The second program, which we started this year that we're seeing really good results with, is what we call anniversary surveys. So when people are coming up on their 1, 2, 3, or 4 years with Compass, they will sit down with a member of my team and talk about how is it going, right? And what are your career goals, and are we supporting you enough towards that? Is there anything else you need? What are your ideas for culture and programs at Compass? And of course, we offer roundtables, we offer engagement surveys, but we find that really having everyone come to a one-on-one personalized conversation is really helping us to round out that feedback and give us a lot of actionable suggestions, and people have been very open, very receptive, and then we see them also being more comfortable afterwards interacting with our team in other ways.
So how do you build that relationship and trust? And obviously that happens over weeks and months, right, across the first and second and third year. But in that conversation, how do you get people to open up? So a lot of times we see exit interviews, right? People can be a little bit more clamshell, and sometimes they can be valuable, oftentimes not. So how are you making this sort of structure more valuable than an exit interview might be?
So I think we are fortunate in that if we also have a good overall culture where people feel comfortable to be open, that's the foundation. The next thing, of course, is whether you've already met the person you're conducting the anniversary interview with, or whether you haven't, adjusting your style to what's going to make that person comfortable to open up. So it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all. And following up with people and showing them that positive results, changes, new programs do come out of these. So when they're talking to their peers and they say, hey, I got a note from my manager that I'll be doing an anniversary interview with people in culture. What is this? Have you ever done one? It's not, I don't know what that is, or yeah, mine was weird. It's, yeah, I gave some great ideas and I saw them actually change things. Or I asked about something and I received follow-up 2 days later. Or it was actually pretty cool. I came up with new ideas for my career. So I think that positive buzz has helped us, and we found that people have been very open.
So it's a little bit like an engagement survey where you can send it out, but you're going to lose credibility if you never do anything with it.
Yes.
That's a really important thing. So Ryan, I'm curious on your side. You've surveyed diverse constituency from lighting to the new GE that will be built to its venture arm.
Yeah.
How is that translating to kind of a program agenda for you?
Kind of a couple things. So I want to start with current Powered by GE because it's a new business for us, and it's on the edge of being inside of GE and not inside of GE. So for any of you who have organizations where you try to do something outside the norm, right, and call the baby ugly a little bit, this is a hard thing to do. So very specifically, we're developing a whole different executive compensation structure that doesn't utilize some of the systems that are existing in a big entity, but are far more linked to what you see in the marketplace. So we're designing sort of an equity-based, shadow, option-based way to pull in talent from the outside, recognize employees, give them a lot more upside, but a lot more risk. Very similar to what you might see more in a startup environment. And that's contrary to a lot of the design programs that we have. So for us, that's a whole new area to learn and grow and be able to see some skills. And I think it's fantastic and fun, and I'm learning a ton.
And specifically on that program, is it sort of widely known, or will be now since we're all changed?
Fantastic.
It's now known to the world, but I'm curious, is that causing ripples in the GE culture at all, where people wonder why are we treating things differently?
Of course. I think anybody feels that, right? So whether it's a big company like GE or your own company, when you're trying to do something new and innovative, you need to expect that you're going to feel resistance. And you've got to work very hard at being compelling about the case for change and being willing to hear no and keep going and refining and figuring out a way to influence it home. So the good news is, though, that it's about helping the business win. We know that if we don't change the way we compensate, we won't be able to recruit the talent that we need to be able to execute the business strategy. So there is a way to do it, but there are people that you have to change their minds. And sometimes compensation is a tough place to innovate. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but we have a little. The other one that I think we feel and see that we're working on, and it's related to culture, is just how people communicate and connect. And you see a ton of tools out there, right? Like Facebook at Work, Slack, I don't know, like all of a sudden Microsoft's got some new stuff coming out with bots. When you have a really distributed workforce that doesn't interact by bumping into each other day to day, you gotta find ways to collaborate. And so for me, that's a big one that we're working on as an HR team, is what are the right tools? How do we incentivize? How do we get folks to connect and share? And then if you're willing, I'd just like to add a personal one, because I think we all need to work on ourselves, or I think it's part of why we're here, learning from each other. But for me, I'm trying to find ways to disrupt my point of view. And
What do you mean by that?
And what I mean by that is, we all kind of get into a place where we know how things work, right? We know the people, we know the systems, we have this consistent set of influencers. And I think to be really innovative, and I love that you brought up innovation earlier, because in function, I think we need to innovate a lot more, and we don't, and we need to do more. I think you need to be able to change your point of view. So a lot of what I try to do is meet different kinds of people, take myself out of the circumstances I'm in, books, articles, all that stuff. So it's fun to listen to all these different points of view because it helps you build, right? And so I would encourage all of us to find ways to disrupt our points of view, and I think it helps us be better HR practitioners for sure, but just be better business leaders.
And to do that, I mean, have you tried to do something programmatic, or is it more it's a matter of just realizing and being mindful that I want to seek diverse sources of information, I want to talk to people I normally don't?
Yeah.
Or do you have in your calendar, listen, 4 hours a week, I'm talking to folks I've never talked to before?
It's more me just being nerdy. I think less programmatic. But I find as I'm doing it more, it's becoming more programmatic. Like I know I need and really enjoy learning from folks in lots of different organizations, from big to small, or sitting down and having dinner with artists, or finding somebody that is in the, I don't know, sort of outdoors environment, or reading a book by Willie Nelson, but also reading a book about, from Dalai Lama. Just finding different ways to sort of change and mix your mind so that you can bring that to your business. And over time, what happens is those influences help you think about problems and issues in a different sort of way. And then I think that helps us be better HR people and help our businesses win. So I think it's just maybe a natural curiosity, but I want to share it because I'm sure a lot of you do it. That's why we're here tonight, because you're here to learn. Me too, by the way. And I think that it's something I would encourage your way.
I'll just add to that, I think what's been like kind of tagging on to what you're saying, but kind of more eye-opening, and yes, we're all here tonight, is that I find that the HR community over the last few years has become much more inclusive of one another and helping each other out. I think, early on in my career, you were sort of in your box in your job, in your company, and it was like, this is my HR plan. I'm not sharing it with anybody. It's our little secret sauce. And I think what we've realized over time, or at least I personally realized over time, is that you can't, none of us can be each other's business, right? At the end of the day, even if Sue and I were running very similar companies, at the end of the day, we have different cultures, we have different points of view and different missions, and even if we swap things, we couldn't be each other. And when you kind of break down that wall, you realize we can all learn from each other, we can share programs, we can share ideas, and it makes us all better because of it, and it makes our employees better, and it makes all the experiences that we're trying to deliver in our organizations better. So I think that's something that I love seeing, is just how we're kind of more together as a profession.
So to that point, we have a lot of folks in the audience who are looking to learn from a disruptive point of view to bring in more strategic ideas into the organization. What piece of advice would you give this group as you're thinking about something that might be a little bit out there in terms of applying more strategic programs to the line of business and making sure that they are ingested and metabolized by the organization and ultimately successful? So you look like you're either thinking or maybe have some cold call right now. Sarah, we can start with you. I'll see
You
you
raise the bar by saying it has to be really insightful.
It can also be just fun a little airtime too. We do that here too sometimes.
It's not here to kick, which are the two things I wanted to talk about. But I mean, I think that here's a shot. So I think in HR, like it's really important to be able to have great conversations with executives and be able to speak kind of the same language. And one thing that isn't actually even my idea, that came from the community of HR professionals that I hang out with, was to occasionally, maybe quarterly or semi-annually, have like a State of the Union kind of presentation or report or dashboard that you present to the executives about what the people team has accomplished, and make it really data-driven, show the impact, and be able to identify what are the issues that you see coming down the pipe and what are you going to do about it. And I think when you make it very data-driven and it's like very factual, it draws the attention and the interest of the people that you're talking to, and they get engaged. And I mean, if you use language like just employee engagement and culture, and I mean, I think everyone cares about that, but like it's very hard for them, I think, and I don't want to generalize, but like to put their mind around it. But if you give them like some hard facts, especially benchmarking data, I think they love, I mean, everyone's really competitive and they love knowing what everyone else is doing. So to be able to say, oh, well, they're doing that, then you can, that's one way to like make change happen. So this is an idea.
I'll take it as well, which is, I think, bring people on the journey with you. I think oftentimes as HR professionals, we feel like we need to deliver this like perfect package out to our business partners. But I think bring them along while you're drafting, you know, get feedback along the way in terms of the programs and the projects that you're looking to put out, because I think if you get your stakeholder buy-in early on, you'll get more advocates and you'll get more people that will help get your programs out there. And I've found that over the time, that's been, you know, the biggest learning that I've had along the way.
Yeah, I would, you know, echo what both of you said and add, I think that, you know, along the lines was what you were saying, more of, you know, a pull than a push. So I think sometimes you can take what you've read about, what your peers are telling you they're doing, as you said, this community where we're now sharing more of our practices with each other. You can take that in concert with the feedback you're receiving from your employees, run some focus groups, run sessions with leaders who are influencers, and ask, what if we renovate our existing program on this to do it this way, right? What are your thoughts? What if we introduce this new program that we think is going to meet these needs and drive this type of success for the business? I'm not sure that it needs to be something that is truly new or groundbreaking. It needs to, instead, in my personal perspective, be something that people feel is going to meet needs that they have, or that once they hear it, they didn't know that they have, but they do feel they need. Like the way we all feel about our smartphones that we didn't know we needed 10 years ago, but probably now don't want to give up.
It's been, I talk a lot about the business and metrics and helping the business win, and certainly spend a lot of time on that. And I also think in some ways as a function, we lean so heavily on how to use business partners and how to sit at the table with executives, etc. But the thing that I'm pushing more and more and more on is emotional work. And I call it the F word, which is feeling, right? So actually sitting down with somebody and saying, as a human being, how are you feeling? Like, what do you love about being here? What do you want when you come here? And I think as the human side of what we do, right, we're the experts. We're supposed to be the experts on the human psyche and the best way to motivate and connect with folks. And so I feel like we can do more as a community on how do you connect with the deep emotions and desires of people at work, and then how do you harness that in a way that their productivity and success of business comes along. And I'm not sure that we've really unpacked the potential of that. And I'm not saying to go all behavioral scientist on it, but I think that there's a lot more that we can do there while still preserving our very strong business knowledge and understanding how business operates. But at the end of the day, we're the human experts, and I challenge myself and us to figure out how to really pull that out.
So, warning to my mic runners, if you guys can be ready in the next couple minutes. I think 3 of the 4 of you are recruiting right now. So, if you want to give a plug, you might be surprised. There's some amazing HR people in the audience today, and these amazing HR people probably know another 500. So, you guys can talk a little bit about 1 or 2 key roles that you're recruiting for right now.
If I've hit any passion point for any of you, we're looking for a director of caregiver recruiting. So if you enjoy being the thrills and chills of that kind of business, that's one of the key roles that we're looking for on our team.
We're starting a search for a very developmental and coaching-minded HR business partner. And that hasn't even hit the press yet, but hopefully we'll be ready for next week.
We are looking for the same exact thing as Sue. So feel free to apply to both or tell your contacts to apply to both, and also looking for a recruiter to join our team.
I think meeting great people all the time is really important in recruiting, right? So even though I don't have a role I'm thinking about at the moment, I'd love to meet anybody who'd be interested in learning about the company and how to develop more and whether that fits the path that they're on.
So, well, there are great people in the audience, and these great people have great questions. So we're now going to open up to you. So please feel free to ask your questions, feel free to introduce yourself, and then direct your question towards the panel or one individual in particular.
Hi, thank you for the panel. It's really a great discussion. Adam Schaefer, I work with Bloomberg. I actually am dedicated to HR, but I don't sit in that department. Question I have for you is kind of analogous to what we all talk about from an HR perspective in terms of employer brand. Oftentimes the brand is what's represented, reflected, shown to the outside, but sometimes it's very different when you join that employer from the inside. Using that analogy, HR as a profession, I think exerts a brand externally for those that are familiar with it and maybe those that are not. What is your perspective in terms of the duality between what HR is perceived as, either for those that know it and have lived through it, or those that are just coming into it, versus kind of sometimes what it is from the perspective of business, and how are you addressing that, either as a professional or within your organizations?
I'll jump in for a second. I feel like, and this comes from having been on both sides of the fence and hearing it as a colleague of someone who's not in HR, is that I think we often get the rap of there's the police, or we're policing people, and we're all about the policy and the programs, and you've got to follow everything just like this. And my philosophy and how I've tried to coach and develop the teams that I've led is that I want us to look more like a guidance counselor in your college or your high school, where you're coming for career advice and we're helping and supporting you, and that we can live in the gray. And I joke most of the time that I as easily write the policy as I'm probably the first person who breaks it, because I'll find some way to bend it for whoever needs it bent. So I think a lot of it is just how you show up, how you come across, how you partner, how you listen, and how you help shape what your business needs in order to create value and trust between yourselves and the organization, and to separate from being that police officer that I think we sometimes get a rap for.
I think just to add to that, I think, one of the questions was around what do you call your function, and we call it people, and that was by design. And it was because I felt like that was a way for us to get involved way beyond just what you typically think of as HR. And I think to Ciara's point, like when people hear people, they don't necessarily know what that means, and so there's curiosity, and there's a little bit more, I think, forgiveness and willingness for you to do different things. And I think in some ways it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because you end up having boundless scope because everything deals with people. And so it allows us to select like what are the things that we really want to focus on and be known for.
Yeah, I think as I talked about, a couple of times earlier, it's how are we making sure that there are interactions that are outside of what maybe some of the more negative stereotypes of HR are, and capturing people in those first 90 days so that their first interactions with members of our team are very positive ones, where we also explain what our philosophy for the department is and what it is that we do and what you can come to us for.
To me, trust and transparency is probably one of our most challenging aspects of what we do. And how we build trust with employees and how we have as much transparency as possible is really important. So I think when folks lose trust in the function, they feel like there's hidden things, there's secrets, there's lots of things that are happening behind the scenes. And so the more we can with physical space or with open dialogues or with clarity or with different experiences, build that trust early and show transparency, that can help. But I do think that as a function, we still suffer from that particular point.
Hello, I'm Cynthia. I'm a corporate recruiter at Home Team, actually. So if anyone's interested, come find me after. My question is more geared towards the folks who have had experience building startups in the past. As startups grow, especially as rounds of funding happen and just headcount in general, culture tends to shift a little bit and change from that sort of 4 people in a basement to 150 people in a Flatiron office. How do you deal with that culture shift, and how do you keep everyone sort of level-headed and still productive in the future?
I'll answer that, I guess. When I came to Compass, we had just under 200 people, and so now there's 1,000 more people around, so certainly there have been some shifts. We did an exercise because we didn't have company values when I joined to really do a grassroots effort to create those. So we surveyed everyone at Compass, how do you describe how we work together? What are things we do here? What are things we don't do here? Made word maps out of that, and then did focus groups and got executive buy-in into what ultimately became our values. We went in the beginning of this year and said, okay, things have changed, so we want to do a values recommitment exercise to see, are these still the right values? Do these still describe our culture with an influx of so many new people? And we went out and did that and wound up changing some of the taglines and the descriptors, but seeing that things were still the same. So I think involving people in that exercise, as well as being able to reference it, remind people of that exercise, and tell them, as a company grows, of course certain things will change or feel different, but what are the things that are most important to our identity as Compass? And do you feel those are the same? It's the same way as a family changes over time, as the age of people in the family will change. Nothing is static, but I do think that you're very right that people often need reassurance that the things that make them really passionate and the F-word feelings that they have about what they want to get from the company, that you're showing them that those are still there to give them that confidence to connect to that.
Can I be a panelist for a second? Can I get permission from the panel? So we were about 50 people 2 years ago. We're about 250 people today. And we are very much of a culture-driven organization. And that culture has persisted in that time. And I think it's for a few reasons. One is everybody who's joined has bought into the culture that they're joining and that they're building together. So not to say that it stays exactly the same, but by really selecting people who self-select into that, you start the first step in the process. The other part is it's not just the employee base at large, but also the executives are deeply committed to sustaining the culture. We live and work in San Francisco. It's an incredibly competitive job market. And if we didn't create a place with a cultural pull, we'd probably lose a lot of our advantage. So it's something that the executives talk about literally every week in our executive meetings. It's keeping tabs on the culture, making sure that we're progressing it, but it's still staying true to what it is. So it needs to matter to the employees at large. It needs to matter to the executive team. It needs to be talked about. And then when we hire, we have our feedback form is built around our cultural values. Our performance reviews, which we still do, are built around our cultural values. Our awards at the end of the year, we have one award for each of the cultural values. It's just a matter of we decided to commit to it. And organizations can only commit to so many things. And you can't be culture-driven and technology driven and best of this driven. You can't be driven by everything. You need to choose those few things that you're driven by. And so if culture is one of them, you should make a commitment across the entire org.
Hi, my name is Emma Osari. I'm the program coordinator at the Arts and Business Council of New York, and we find creative ways to link the private sector with the nonprofit sector, and we see this huge opportunity in growing nonprofit capacity through providing creative services to corporations. And so the name of this event is People Innovators. So how are you keeping your people innovative? How are you keeping them creative? How are you building that creative spirit? Obviously, we think it's best done through the arts, but maybe you have either arts examples or other examples that you can share that you're either using for yourselves in your own learning or with your employees.
It's a great question, and it kind of fits back to this disruptive point of view a bit. I think there are a lot of things that companies can do, and to me, there's a big part of learning. And when you're in this learning process, how do you bring in different ways? So whether it's learning through art activity, or learning through meditation, or learning through business cycles, all of those things, a learning path can help you be innovative. I think the next thing you have to do is expose people to a lot of things that they haven't seen before. Whether that's different physical environments, different geographic environments, different diversity environments, those are all different sources of input. And then the third thing is you actually have to ask people sometimes to be innovative, right? You have to set an expectation that they're going to think differently, act differently, and try to find solutions to issues. And I think sometimes we just don't ask people to do it. Somebody says, well, I'm not creative. Well, that's not really true. Everybody's creative in their own way. Sometimes you have to unlock it. You have to help them unlock it. And so I'd be interested to know what the panel does as well. But I find that the third one is a really important one. Everybody can find their own source of creativity. You just have to be sometimes asked or expected to do it, and then given some tools and resources. So I'd love to hear it.
I'll give it a shot. I mean, I would say, we've just started introducing a lot of kind of training programs into First Ed. So we have like a monthly all-staff workshop, which isn't just about hard skills, but mainly around soft skills and like feelings and things like that. And I think that's been helpful to like open up people's minds. But we've also tapped our employees themselves who are very passionate about certain topics, and they are now leading lunch and learns. So we've now done one, we have another one scheduled. Molly is going to be doing it soon on, what is this called again, this plant? And we plan to learn both. Succulents, yes. So people will like share their passions, and I think that's like a great source that a lot of companies may not tap enough, because there are people, like so many, I mean, you hire diverse, fascinating people, and then we ask them to do their jobs instead of actually taking advantage of like the intrinsic interest that they have. So that's an idea.
I'm not sure we've mastered it. Within our marketing and design team, they'll have a lot of different contests, whether it's to design new posters for our values. We try to, across the rest of the business, ask people to come with 2 lunches with our CEO and what are your business ideas for Compass, and solicit that we want those from people. We encourage people to take time and work on a project that's somewhat unrelated. So I had an engineer, for example, who wanted an app that would show people when the restroom was occupied and when it wasn't. We decided that was creative, but not maybe the most pragmatic idea at the time.
Camera was a problem.
It wouldn't need a camera. It was actually by knowing when the door was locked. Because he was like, I know you will object to a camera. I've thought about that. But through continually encouraging that and then asking people the things that we already do, how can we do that differently? How should we be doing this better next year, and encouraging that, and people seeing that our leadership team is known to be innovative and not decide something once and just stick with it, seems to have helped us a lot.
And just to add to that, sorry, I know we spoke about this, but I was prompted to remember that Venmo, we did a ton of stuff. So we had a hack week, which everyone got involved in and came up with like different ideas. We had someone actually similar idea where they knew where the shower was available, and it was really cool. It's really funny that they had the same idea. But we also would do things like, I think most recently we did like an Indian dance class. We did a Michael Jackson class, dance class. So we just like bring in all kinds of interesting sort of learning opportunities, and they're not necessarily tied to the work.
Hi, this question is for Ryan. Ryan, I'm Madhuri Kumara, the Assistant Vice President of Human Capital at an amazing organization, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation International. And it's my 5th week into the job. So Elizabeth, I take the tiara from you on that. So the question is around disruption, right? So you have really intrigued me with your thinking around the need to be disruptive in our own thinking, and to encourage that around the organization. And I think that comes easier in startups probably, and harder in older organizations like yours and mine. We've been around for about 40 years. And my question is that when disruptive thinking becomes an urgency because things are changing, and we need everybody in the organization to question assumptions and challenge their own thinking and practices inside an organization, how can the people function or HR support that and make it safe for people to think in a disruptive manner and be encouraged to do so despite the fear of what that might lead to in an organization which is not traditionally known for disruptive thinking?
I love that you use that word safe, right? What a very fundamental emotional need all of us have, and how do we as a team provide that at work? And we should discuss that more, but I love that word. I think you can do it with culture. And so I love the fact that this story about how you guys had your first cultural set of North Star values, and then there was like a validation, some change. What we've been experiencing inside of our organization is that the world is changing so much and so fast that you have to have employees think about that they're going to be disruptive, the businesses that they're in are disruptive, that we have to be able to fail fast and learn super quick. And that is, we've been able to do that through cultural norms, right? And calling it out, sort of frankly changing some of the cultural beliefs that we have as a company to something different and saying, we want to be more like this, and we're going to promote leaders, we're going to recognize people, we're going to pay for performance and behaviors that align to those kinds of things. So in big organizations that I think are harder to move, if there's a really strong belief in culture, you can use it as a lever, and then you can reward, retain, hire, develop around those things. So we're finding that. The next thing you have to do is you have to tell stories and give examples of where people did it, and where they were safe when they failed fast, or they disrupted, and they were supported. And I think that's probably the hardest part, because you have usually you have a set of leaders who behave a certain way or recognize, and it's not safe for them to want to change, and you have this middle layer that's kind of, well, my leaders are this way, and I don't know if I'm going to be, my career is going to move if I don't do those things, and you have this large group of people that are saying, please, we have to change this about this organization. So you've got to find examples in the middle there that you can hold out and say, look, somebody did this, they tried, they failed, and we love them for it, and here's what they learned. One thing we did in our team was we had something called a FailCon, where we did it for everybody globally. We had Beth Comstock, in fact, she's kicked it off, and we had her interviewed, and she spent an hour talking about failure and all the things that she did wrong and all the things she learned and everything, and then at our different organizational locations, we had the most senior leader get up and have the same interview. Oh, I did this, I failed, I learned, this is what happened. And we talked about what are the issues with failure, why are we so afraid of it? So we talked about the emotion of what goes on. So I think there are very tactical things you can do, and your culture has to support it, you have to tell stories. And then you have to make a personal decision about whether or not you believe strongly enough in it to risk maybe being a little bit of an outcast in the organization. And that's a personal decision for all of us. and then you have to decide whether or not that organization is right for you. And I think we all go through that, myself included. And I think that's sometimes some of the hardest work that we have to do on ourselves.
That's a good question. How did that whole FailCon concept come about? Was it something that was led by HR, or was it something that like an executive said, oh, let's do this?
We have a group of people we call the Culture Club, but Boy George does not show up, I promise, for those who are from the, I call them 80s babies, right? So we took a group of some of our most capable folks. We meet with me, myself, and Beth like once a month, and we, frankly, there's no agenda. We'll come in and be like, she'll be like, okay, tell me what's on your mind, what's going on. Tell me something that you don't want to tell me. Like, challenge me. What can we do culturally? What are our issues? What's holding us back as a team? And this idea that we needed to kind of talk about failure a lot more, and then we're like, well, let's do like, Comic-Con, let's do FailCon. And we just got creative. And then how do we make it work? And then the creative spirit took over, and then boom, it took off from there. So it was a lot of fun. The comments we got from the team was so strong. It was great. There's just so much to learn from it.
I think we have time for 2 questions. Last 2 questions.
Thanks, I'm Deborah Keenan with High Impact Advisors. So just a couple of comments on culture versus engagement. And I always think of culture is really, the way things really happen, and engagement is how you feel about, how people feel about what's really going on there. So instead of talking about feelings, even that idea of engagement is kind of a more, I'm going to say, business savvy way. I'd like to talk about engagement. And I also feel as an HR practitioner, in my frustration with HR is that we don't quantify things and align what we do to the business strategy. We just miss that all the time. And then we wonder why people aren't taking it seriously. And we need to take what we do and figure out how to put some numbers with it if it's a very numbers-driven organization, so that we have the credibility that you need and understand it. And I also think from an HR perspective, we have to start looking at what we have to stop doing and simplifying things. We've made things very, very complex, and I think unnecessarily so. So what do any of you panelists think, what is the thing that you think HR should just stop doing in your organization that would really make a difference?
I can't speak directly in Davidson, but I can tell you from my former life what we did. And that, a lot of the conversation that happened around performance management over the last few years. And at my time at Vivo, we iterated on performance management pretty much every year that I was there. And then we stumbled upon that we were just getting in our own way about it, and we were trying to just, go along with the thread and recognize that our process was just too cumbersome and we were expecting too much. And so we completely stripped it down. We just said, okay, we're going to stop getting in the way of these conversations. Because at the end of the day, if people are really engaged and are doing well, you're almost doing that performance process for like the 1% is what we realized. You're doing it to focus on that 1% that needs development versus the 99 that are performing well. And we stripped it down to a Word document. We stopped being online. We stopped having to, focus on all these competencies and having people talk. We literally broke it down to 3 questions on a Microsoft Word document. We got more applause for doing that than the other 3 years of us trying to crank it out and make it something special. So I talked about nimbleness earlier, and I think it's sometimes, to your point, it's like awareness, and we're just getting in the way and putting that process that's not necessary. I think one thing that we could stop, or I don't think we do it that much at First Dibs, but I guess I think about stereotypical HR, it's probably referencing policies. And so we don't really do that because we believe in explaining why we're doing what we're doing. Because that's really the most important piece of it, is really just like to get people to understand the spirit of why we're doing what we're doing. And just if you say like, oh yeah, well we have a policy on that, and then just kind of, it just feels like a policing thing, it just feels bureaucratic, and it doesn't make you feel like you're working with someone who's truly a partner.
I I'm not a good person to answer this question because I'm still working on my development need of, saying no to things, so.
We need to turn over the whole HR stack in 12 months, so.
Let's take another question.
Last question. Who's going to take us home?
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, I work for Rag & Bone. So one thing that we are looking at recently is people are really good at identifying where other teams have opportunities and where other people are sort of breaking and holding up the whole business product supply chain infrastructure. And so one thing that we're looking at is how we can change that and try to promote positive recognition in other teams, but do it really authentically in a way that feels really natural and culturally driven. And wondering if you have any suggestions for best ways of doing that and cultivating a culture of positive cross-functional empathy and recognition.
I can start. I mean, we have a culture at home team of shout-outs. So at every all hands, people send in anonymous shout-outs, and it works amazing. I mean, we stand there probably for a solid 10 minutes at the end of every all hands and just rattle through a list of different, positive things that people have done across the company, and it is really cross-functional. And it's anonymous, so unfortunately you don't know who's saying what about the other person, but just as a collective, list, it's always about different functions and different people.
This was an issue that we identified early on because it came up in the employee survey, and people felt like they weren't getting a lot of recognition. So one of the things that we implemented is a tool called Reflective. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a tool that you can use for performance management, but also they have what's called a recognition wall. And anyone can go in there and just say, thanks for XYZ. And it shows up and it's public. So when we rolled it out, we also rolled out feedback training because we didn't want it to be just a bunch of thanks for being my friend or whatever. And so I think we were able to promote good practices and feedback and also get more cross-functional kind of recognition. And then to make sure that that's something that's continuing to happen during our weekly all hands, we have kind of highlights. So we'll pick two sort of randomly, and then bring out the folks that gave the recognition and have them tell the story in a little bit more detail so that there's more public kind of awareness.
I think that it's a good question because the authentic part is always tough for some people. I mean, there's some groups of people where you give them any sort of recognition program and they love it, and then there can be other groups of people where no matter how you try to do it, they're this is a little cheesy and why do we need to do this? So I definitely don't have the answer, but what we've tried to do with our all-team meeting awards, which anyone can nominate anyone else, they're based on each of our 4 values, we try to make it more fun. So we have a member of our PR team who's also a stand-up comedian, and she does a great job with slides. So if you win an award, not only do you get a Compass hoodie that you can only get for winning an award on the recognition, but you're somewhat roasted on a very creative PowerPoint page in front of the whole company. So we do that to just add a little bit more levity to it, so it doesn't feel like a poster on the wall that says motivation, right?
I love the global reward systems where you can literally got one that's sort of broad and you can recognize teams, and that's wonderful. One of the best ways I think I see teams or people reward each other is with feedback. And so as a company, we went away from something very complex that had been around for a long time and worked very well to something that's really simple, which is a much easier way to get peer-to-peer feedback. And so sometimes the best recognition that I get is a note, and it's through a system that we have, it's a home note, we call it PD, where I get a note from somebody that says, I really appreciate what you did, Ryan, I want you to continue to do this was a great quality, or frankly, I want you to consider maybe doing it differently next time. And so as much as I love some of the ideas here, I'm going to borrow a few, also feedback can be a great way to recognize, and so encouraging that in your culture can really help out.
But in the spirit of feedback, I want to thank the 4 of you. This was an incredibly useful conversation for me personally. I thought you guys brought yourselves and really, really interesting things to say about the topic. So thank you for coming in the first place and for engaging the way you did. So please join me in thanking